So what are you doing?
Nothing.
Nothing? Why not?
I'm trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website.
Sounds like a cool website.
Yeah, it's alright. Oh, wait, I might have it.
You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.
You like music, you like weed, well, we gonna be good friends indeed. This is not much I like more than smoking trees. They'll make you dance the do-si-do and teach you how the chiva grows. Smoke a bowl on the 420 radio show. On Lifestyle Radio.
That's right. This is Lifestyle Radio and the 420 Radio Show. Hi, I'm Al. I'm here with Lori and Marcel and Ross, and we have Dr. Murakami. Is it Murakami? Is that how it's spelled? Sounds?
That's close enough.
Okay. The doctor is here. We're going to talk to him about Lyme disease, and it's that time of year, you know, the whole tick thing and stuff like that. We're also going to have some news from Chris Backer, who decided to play hooky today. Ooh. Ding. So, Lori, why don't
we do have his recorded news broadcast?
Yes, we have that. Yeah, we have that as well. Why don't you
okay, good.
Tell the folks what we're going to talk about today with the doctor? Lori.
Okay, well, I've discovered Dr. Murakami online. He's been extremely active with Lyme disease research in BC, and in particular with the application of cannabinoids to assist with the Lyme disease. Now, Dr. Murakami is an expert in Lyme, and it's getting more and more prevalent here in Canada. I guess the warmer the winters get. I know different insects are able to overwinter differently when you don't have long periods of minus 30 and so on. So I'm suspecting that may be part of the prevalence recently, and I think I'd like to introduce the doctor and have him go forward and introduce himself and his background and what he's been doing. Welcome, Doctor.
Oh, thank you for having me. My name is Dr. Ernie-Murakami, and I have a degree in bacteriology and immunology from UBC, and also a medical degree from the UBC Medical School as well. And my status is clinical associate professor emeritus at UBC. Just a bit about myself. My grandparents in Japan had 4 daughters, and my mother was a second daughter, and she came to Canada and came to Denman Island, then to Shawinigan, then to Vancouver, where she met my dad, and he was a photographer. And then how I got interested in medicine was we had to serve internment during the war in Lillooet, BC, because we were considered a threat to national security. And it was there that a friend of mine had an abdominal injury, and he became quite ill, and he died because of an abdominal injury, and there was no doctor in Lillooet at that time or a hospital. So I said to my parents, I want to become a doctor. And my first thoughts of becoming a doctor came at that time. But we were financially strapped because of the internship to Lillooet, that we had pretty well lost everything. And we went to Vernon from Lillooet, and there my sister got extremely ill, and she was considered to have double pneumonia. And in the hospital, I visited her every day, but she went downhill very quickly. She was intubated and just about near death. And finally, Dr. Alexander said, you know, your sister's going to die, and you should be prepared for make all the preparations. Anyway, that night we had a call from the hospital saying to come down right away, and we thought my sister had died, but she hadn't died. But there was a supply of new medicine, which had never been used on the civilians before, but it was from the Army base, and it's called penicillin. And they said it was a surplus, and they said, we would like to try it on your sister. And my mother and father said, are you there?
Yes, we're here. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so they just said, we don't want to do experimentation with my daughter. And I said to my mother that the antibiotic comes from a plant. And as soon as I said it came from a plant and it wasn't a chemical, they said, let's go for it. And the doctor said that there's one thing. A lot of people died with penicillin shots because it was so impure, and a lot of people had anaphylactic shock. But anyway, when I said it came from a plant, the mother and father said, okay, let's go ahead with the penicillin. And she was getting 3 shots a day, 25,000 units, which is very minimal. But in 2 days, she was fully recovered. And it was my first experience with a extract from a mold killing a pneumococcal bacteria. So even then, my interest in medicine even became greater. But again, my parents said, think of something else. So I went to UBC Medical School, and instead of taking into a medical training group, I went into bacteriology and immunology, which gave me a tremendous understanding of the spirochete of Lyme and the eggs. And it was so identical to Lyme when it first came out in eggs that I had a step above everybody else, having my knowledge of the bacteriology and immunology confronting the people with Lyme disease. And so anyway, I was very, very fortunate to meet a Dr. R.B. Kerr, who was the head of internal medicine. And he spoke to me one day and he said, you're interested in medicine, aren't you? I said, I've always been interested in medicine because of my 2 incidences, one in Lillooet and one in Vernon. My sister just about dying. He says, Ernie, you're made for medicine. You go into medicine and don't worry about a thing. So it was his encouragement and his backing that I finally got into medicine. And in medicine, I was quite happy with working in a small community called Hope, BC. And it was there that I developed 2 wood tick removal techniques, and it's on YouTube under Murakami tick removal. And it was there that I met a Dr. George Price, and he was a rheumatologist who worked at my clinic, and he had the first case of Lyme disease in British Columbia, and he presented it to the Borreliosis Foundation meeting in Vancouver, and that's where I was presenting my wood tick removal. And I talked him into coming to Hope to do a permanent rheumatological consultation, and he came, and he's been there until he passed away. But he had the first case of Lyme disease, and I became so fascinated when he first described it that my knowledge of Lyme disease came from him and another 2 doctors, Dr. Sayson and Dr. Kastrikoff, who worked in my office, and Dr. Sayson lectured on Lyme disease, and my knowledge of Lyme disease became very, very apparent. And Dr. Kastrikoff had the first case that he gave intravenous ceftriaxone to, and had a successful result. And then I had my own 2 cases, and one in Hope and one in Agassiz, 25 miles apart. Then I realized that this is a bit of an epidemic in this area. So I told the professors at Vancouver and the CDC that we have a bit of an epidemic here, because I said 1 case in Agassiz, BC, and 25 miles away in Hope, another case. Anyway, their studies didn't reveal much of the cases, and they steadfastly said it's only about 1 in 1,000 cases, despite the fact I was batting 100% in 2 cases. And from that on, after I treated those 2 successfully, after 3 or 4 weeks of the antibiotic, I became more interested and developed a special interest in Lyme disease. And I saw many, many cases, and then it was conflictual in the treatment of Lyme disease because I was going beyond the 30 days. And this is because of the cystic form of the disease that persists and makes the germ or the spirochete survive in the body, and it causes a repeated infection. So unless you get rid of the eggs or the survival forms, you'll never get rid of the Lyme spirochetes. The spirochetes are easy to treat with penicillin and amoxicillin and doxycycline, and it was easy to get rid of. But the cystic form required a different form of antibiotic, and they had a lot of side effects. There were permanent neuropathies and cancer of the pancreas spheres. So that there was a real need for some other avenue to treat these cases. In any case, I resigned in 2008 for health reasons and stress reasons, but it didn't stop me from lecturing, and I continued to lecture in BC and across Canada and the States. And I had the liberty and because I had no license, I was spending more time teaching and giving lectures all over the place and talking to patients and giving free advice on what to do if they had symptoms. And I would educate them about the symptoms of Lyme disease in the first, second, and third stages. Then I would speak to their private physician who would follow my recommendations from the education that I had given to the patient. And this became quite successful, and I was finding a lot of people who had been misdiagnosed, such as MS is a very common denominator when it comes to a misdiagnosis, because the symptoms of Lyme disease duplicated the symptoms of MS very, very closely. And to give you an idea of the misdiagnosis, which I accuse my own medical profession of, is that we have the highest MS in the world. There's nothing, no other country has the MS count that we have here, which goes from 240 to 340 per 100,000, and the rest of the countries are much, much less. And we have the absolute lowest count when it comes to Lyme disease. And I blame that on the faulty techniques of interpretation of the results and the need for a better Lyme testing, laboratory serological testing or PCRs or whatever methods we have to do up. We have to do it urgently because we do have an epidemic of Lyme disease in North America. And so one thing led to another, and I kept in communication with a lot of patients. And one thing is, they said, Dr. Murakami, we've taken all the antibiotics, IV, orally, and taken all the narcotics and the anti-inflammatories and the antidepressants, antispasmodics, hypnotics, to get the symptoms which came with Lyme disease because it was a multi-organ system breakdown. And they all said one thing, Dr. Murakami, I know you don't like us smoking, but when we took a puff of cigarettes, it did better than the narcotics and the antibiotics and all the anti-inflammatories that we were taking. So I said, well, smoking, I don't really approve of it, whether smoking cigarettes or pot. Try the cannabidiol paste or oil, which is totally psychoactive free, and there's no side effects of serious nature that would deter you from using it. And a lot of them converted to using the hemp cannabidiol, which was legal, and so they started to use it, and they reported back and said, Dr. Murakami, the symptoms are much better, much improved. Not everybody, but a high percentage of cannabidiol hemp users were finding that they were becoming symptom-free in a very dramatic fashion. So I was quite happy with that. At least it was something that the multi-symptoms of Lyme disease were being controlled by this multi-system control from cannabidiol from hemp. So anyway, this went on for quite a while, and I had some people who took it for quite a while, and they ran out of finances because of the cost of cannabidiol is quite high. And they said, you know, my Lyme symptoms didn't come back. And this happened to one, and I thought, no, that's kind of weird. And another one, 2 in a row, almost said, I stopped taking it, my Lyme symptoms did not come back. So I know Dr. Eva Sappi in New Haven University, and I requested her to take some of the hemp cannabidiol and see what it did in the test tube. And she did it for me, and I don't know if she was really expecting anything dramatic, but she phoned me back quite excited, and she said, Ernie, you were right. The cannabidiol in different solutions, and especially at 10 millimoles per cc, did cause a dramatic killing effect of the Lyme in the test tube. This would be an in vitro study. So from there, that was 2014, and from there we went to attack the biofilm, which, as you may know, can be produced by many organisms, and it protects the germ from the antibiotics, the white blood cells, and the antibodies that are in a person, but it just couldn't penetrate the biofilm. And Dr. Kindry and Dr. Banerjee, we studied this. They were colleagues in the Lyme fight, and they're both retired and have passed away. But I kept the studies that they had done, and I've come to the conclusion that this killing of the biofilm and the spirochetes by cannabidiol may be the answer to acute and chronic Lyme disease. And at the present time, we are using it to kill the survival forms, which is called eggs or cysts or L forms or granules. And it appears to be working on that, but it's not quite completed yet because the survival of these egg forms are very, very difficult to study, and we have to study them for longer periods of time because the persistence in the body of the cystic forms, which is hard to believe, but these cystic forms are formed when the spirochete dies in the body, and it invades every organ in the body, and therefore the longer period of time is really needed to study this, and we're in that stage right now. Now, in the meantime, when a lot of people will say to me, Dr. Murakami, we've taken all the standard antibiotics, narcotics, and anti-inflammatories, and even the intravenous form of the medications, we did not get a complete cure. And so I said, well, if you can try the cannabidiol on a trial basis, it's a vegetable, it's legal, and it's got no basic side effects, and it has been used for 5,000 years in China as a therapeutic agent, and I don't know what statistical studies they have there, but there must be some way of tracing down all the statistics on the people who have been using cannabidiol indirectly through hemp or other plants. I'm sure now it's not just the hemp and marijuana that has the cannabidiol, but they found it in broccoli and carrots, blueberries, blackberries, and mother's milk. Of all things, Mother Nature gave it to us, and I guess was protecting the babies from infection, and we've always found that mother's milk has always gave a better protection to the child and the newborn, and it's something that we should even investigate even further, and it has been done quite extensively by Dr. Mechulam in Israel. And he was the first pioneer in the study of this, and he's been praised and knighted for his work on getting it started. In Israel, they've got great numbers of hospital patients taking it on a regular basis, and they have both clinical, psychological, and physical improvements when they have it as a regular diet. So it's something that we have to really, really consider, that there's a tremendous benefit, and it's not just the cannabidiol, there's also two others that are psychoactive free, and it's called cannabigerol and cannabichromine. Cannabichromine has also been found that it has a neuroprotective and restorative function, and they have used it for football players, hockey players, motor vehicle accident, head injuries, and they find that they're healing much faster, and recovery is more advanced and progressive compared to, say, the standard cannabidiol. But they all seem to have a neuroprotective effect, but the most outstanding one that's been studied is cannabichromine. My first experience with the synthetic form of marijuana, it was called Nabilone, and it was a perfectly legal drug with a drug identity number, and doctors were using it for neurological problems. And I had my first case of MS with real severe psychological disturbance and really rapid advancing, rapidly progressing MS. And she was physically disabled, ended up in hospital, and it was really difficult because psychologically she was paranoid, hysterical, and having all sorts of problems, phoning me all the time, day and night, and all my partners in the clinic, and accusing me of trying to kill her and everything else. And I had tried all the common antipsychotics, you name it, the tricyclics and the SSRIs, and we just could not control her problems. So when Nabilone came out in 1985, I said to the family, what do you think? Could we try Nabilone? They're showing some results that are effective against neurological disease, especially MS. And so the parents and the family agreed. And overnight, her psychological status improved to the point she was able to even be less disruptive to the nursing staff because she was calling constantly, and she was happy and cheerful and smiling for the first time that they can recall. And so I was quite impressed at the psychological effects of Nabilone, which is a synthetic form of marijuana, was having such a tremendous effect. And that was my first experience with Nabilone, but mind you, he didn't talk about it. As a doctor, if you found that you were using marijuana products to treat patients, you wouldn't be very popular, although the ideas have changed a lot lately. So there's a few other compounds that came out besides Nabilone and Sesamet and Ativex. There's about 4 or 5 now that are extracts from marijuana, which is perfectly legal, and having a DIN number, any medical doctor could prescribe it. But it still had the image of belonging to the marijuana family, and doctors are just afraid to use it. And even when I was using it, I was afraid to even say that I was using a marijuana extract or a synthetic marijuana product to treat people. And it had definitely an advantage over a lot of other medications. So it's something that we should really, really, in the medical profession, sit down and dialogue and get rid of this medical divide that exists with Lyme disease and cannabidiol products. And it is opening up, and I know that the cannabidiol products are used for HIV patients who are on cocktails of tricyclic antiviral agents, and nausea and vomiting is not controlled by the Gravol or the scopolamine patches. They put them on the cannabidiol or the cannabidiol marijuana products, and they get a highly effective way of controlling the nausea, vomiting, the side effects, the anxiety, the depression, and the muscle spasm and pains that comes with the cannabis products. The other one is cancer patients who are on chemotherapy, and there's tremendous side effects with chemotherapy, not only loss of hair, loss of weight, toxic symptoms of nausea and vomiting appear to be controlled with cannabis products. And I'm really, really happy that the medical world is starting to open their eyes on the benefits of this product. But it's amazing that we can use the products of synthetic nature from marijuana, and yet when we try to use the marijuana directly as a vegetable, it is frowned upon. But I think now the 75% of the study done of the general public shows that they are interested in making it legal, and I don't see why we can't make it legal, because the side effects from alcohol, cigarettes, and prescription narcotics are into the thousands every week that we have, and yet marijuana products itself doesn't seem to have that kind of a problem. I'm not saying it's totally symptom-free, because there are some cases of people driving with it, and that should be done. And people over 25 could use it freely. And other than that, it should be used on a urgent basis. That there are side effects in children who use it early in life, and if they use it for 10 years, they can affect the psychoneural pathways, which is of some concern, and has to be studied. But I think that the medical benefits are going to supersede any side effects the way it's going. And I think the medical world are more and more receptive to it. And I think there's about 50 American states now have legalized it and spread it through the community that it is legal to use it, and it's been decriminalized. And I think our Premier, Justin Trudeau, has promised that he would decriminalize it. That would certainly help. As I say, as a physician, I'm interested in the medical benefits. The social benefits, that's up to each individual to decide for themselves. I personally feel that the cannabidiol should be separated from tetrahydrocannabis, because they're basically two different compounds. But we prove them together and classify them together, whereas I think cannabidiol should be made legal for anyone and everyone with a medical problem. I don't know what else I can speak about this, but I have found that the anecdotal subjective improvement with the cannabidiol has been increasing. I have about 30 cases that they've failed on the standard medications of antibiotics and narcotics, etc., and yet on the cannabidiol therapy, a high percentage are saying that they're greatly improved and are able to reduce their other medications that have not really helped them. So we're waiting to hear from Dr. Eva B. Hello?
I was wondering, Doctor, if you could, when you were listing off all the different medications, traditional medications for Lyme, that's a really long list of things. There must be an awfully long list of symptoms.
Yes, it's a multi-organ system breakdown, and you go from head to toe. You know, you can start off with problems of neurological problems of forgetfulness, visual problems problems with floating eye bodies. You could have tinnitus, a ringing of the ears. Bell's palsy is very common with Lyme disease, and any organ in the body is affected. It attacks every organ without failure. You can get palpitations of the heart, you can get tachyarrhythmias, you can get atrial fibrillation, you can get heart block. In fact, one of my first cases was having a heart block and fainting all the time. And she was finally put on antibiotics, and she stopped her heart block, and she was back to normal. She had to have a pacemaker until she reverted to normal. There have been a lot of problems with other organs, such as thyroid and adrenal glands. The adrenal gland is very sensitive to the spirochete, and it can be killed off. And diabetes, some diabetic patients notice that their requirements for insulin and oral hypoglycemic agents diminishes after the treatment of Lyme disease. So you can go right through the neuromuscular system, arthritis and rheumatism.
That's very interesting, because I'm feeling a lot of those symptoms. I've just a few years ago now diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and then the thyroid, and then this and that, and we're exploring now. So I think I'm going to talk to my doctor about getting diagnosed. Is it a hard one to diagnose Lyme disease?
Well, the diagnosis of Lyme disease is clinical. It's a clinical diagnosis with a multi-organ system breakdown. I've spoken to the Federal Health Department and discussed it with them, and they agree that it is a clinical diagnosis and a lab test is not necessary. The lab test is great. If you have an ELISA test or a C6 ELISA, and you can also get the advanced lab test in the States where they do PCRs directly from the blood and grow it. Some of these tests are very expensive. They're about $600.
Wow.
But the test for neurological, serological determination is by the IgM and the IgG. But in Canada, if somebody has a positive IgG without the IgM, they say it's a false positive. But the reason you get a high IgM is because of the acute active nature of the infection, and the IgM is high. Anywhere around the world, you'll find the IgM, which means active infection, is up. So most doctors say, well, after 2 or 3 months, it should be IgG positive and not the IgM, and they will totally ignore the IgM. But the IgM is positive because of 2 things. One, the antigenic stimulation of the IgM is caused by the changing, alternating surface of the spirochete. Also, the cystic survival forms, or you call it spherocytes or alpha-form granules, are maturing, and therefore you're getting a challenge of a reinfection all the time, and therefore the IgM stays up. They say, well, why is the IgG negative? My reasoning for that is the IgM is negative because the antigenic properties are same as the human body, and therefore the body says, well, that antigen for the IgG is not foreign, so their antibodies are not produced. The only evidence I have for that is when the vaccine came out, they were killing the vaccine, and they were using particles CKDAs 31 and 34, and they were either heating it or lyophilizing it or detoxifying it. But I said, if you inject that into the human body, and yes, it's changed, it's not the natural antigenic status, you're going to cause an autoimmune reaction. And I know it was taken off the market specifically for an autoimmune reaction, especially into the joints of the body. So the diagnosis is not that simple. It's a clinical diagnosis, and the Federal Health Department agrees with me on that, and they have submitted, anyone can look it up in their policy or for the treatment of Lyme disease. You'll find that clinical diagnosis is the way to go in diagnosis of Lyme disease.
Wow.
Well, I know somebody that has a lot of those symptoms recently, especially including tinnitus, and has been bit I don't know how many times, and told me about it. And because he used to work out on the side of the tracks putting fiber optic cable down, can't tell you how many times he came back and told me about getting bit by ticks and having to get the ticks out. And I'm starting to suspect maybe he needs a diagnosis looking toward that.
But if you've got a multi-organ system breakdown, and all the tests for other diseases are negative, you've got to consider Lyme disease. And we have
we have
an epidemic in North America right now.
That is what he's gone through. He's gone through every diagnosis possible and been given all these different pills and things, and nothing shows up. Everything's negative. There's no problem with this. There's no problem with that. There's no problem with anything.
So, doctor, can I ask a quick question? Sorry,
really
Laurie.
Sick.
Go ahead.
Yep. You go ahead.
Okay, so when I approach my doctor and I want her to test this or even consider testing for this, how should I ask her? What should I say? Well,
the C6 ELISA is prepared by having an area that doesn't alternate or change. It's not a variable area. So the C6 ELISA is maybe 5% more sensitive than the straight ELISA, which is the first stage of the treatment. Stage 1 is the ELISA test. Stage 2 is the Western blot. But the Western blot is not done unless the ELISA test is positive. So you could ask your doctor to do the C6 ELISA and the ELISA and the Western blot if they allow you to do it. Some doctors can get the privilege to do the Western blot, and some doctors can't. It varies from province to province. I would try to get that done. And if you can afford to get the test done either in Armin Labs in Germany or Igenex Labs in California, or Fry Labs and LabCorp, MD others, there's lots of hospitals and universities doing these tests. So to rely on the Canadian test, we're having a lot of false negatives. And therefore, the one big thing that we have to do is to get better testing methods for Lyme disease.
Okay.
Why would our tests differ from what they're doing in Europe?
Well, I think the test is still called ELISA, step 1. Step 2 is the Western blot, and that's done internationally around the world. But it's how you interpret it that makes it a positive or a negative. Some people say you have to have about 5 or more bands to be positive, and some people say 2 bands are all you need. So the international world has to get together and standardize these tests, because you're negative one country and you're positive in another. And it's really, really an inconsistent thing, and the doctors have to come down and break down the divide that is present and openly dialogue with this disease. We discuss everything else. We discuss, viruses and all sorts of bacteria, TB, pneumonia, pneumococcus. We discuss it and openly dialogue. But when it comes to Lyme disease, there seems to be this big divide. We just have a big divide, and there's a group saying Lyme doesn't exist.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah, I've actually read some stuff that is pretty. I mean, if you have an open mind, you could actually say, okay, that they say it doesn't exist. I mean, but then they say ADHD doesn't exist too, so, Well, I think, as I say, the medical world has to sit down and talk about it and really get together and share our knowledge about this disease, pros and cons.
And the sooner we get together and discuss it, the better off our patients will be. Because right now, the commonest cause of death of Lyme disease is suicide, because they're just told there's nothing wrong with you. It's all mental. You got too many things wrong with you. It can't be an organic disease. So a lot of patients are still committing suicide.
Huh.
This sounds really complex.
Yeah.
And I'm interested about the part about the MS-like symptoms. And I suffer from primary peripheral neuropathy, which is really hasn't been explained, and they don't really know. Would that be the kind of a symptom that could come from Lyme disease?
Yes, definitely. And it can come with other diseases, and that's what makes it more difficult to diagnose. So on a clinical basis, without positive lab tests, and you've excluded all the other serious neurological diseases and all the organic diseases, then you have to consider Lyme disease if you have a multi-organ system disease. And that's what Lyme is, a multi-organ system breakdown. And unfortunately, MS is the number one disease that is diagnosed, and we have the highest MS in the world. And it's hard to explain. Why do we have the highest MS in the world and the absolute lowest Lyme disease in the world?
How much undiagnosed Lyme disease do you think there is out there? I mean, do you think it's really prevalent? Do you think there's a lot of cases of Lyme disease going undiagnosed?
Well,
misdiagnosed, there's something else like chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, depression, arthritis, ALS, Parkinson, Alzheimer's. My classmate, Dr. Pat McGeer, he's a neurologist, and he has done research on the brains of Alzheimer's patients who had died, and he biopsied the brain, and he was able to actually grow from the patients who had passed away the live spirochete in the Balfour-Stoner-Kelly medium. And he was able to take these spirochetes and invade rat neuron cells and human astrocyte cells. So he's confirmed more than anyone else that the infection of Lyme disease can be the cause of chronic Lyme disease. Not all cases, but a large number. And it's also been proven, too, that 30 days that the specialists say is all you need, they've taken animals like macaques, monkeys, dogs, and other animals, and deer mice, injected them artificially with Lyme disease, treated them for 30 days like the specialists recommend, and after many, many months and years, they can take fresh ticks on these, feeding off these animals, and get spirochetes in the abdomen of the new fresh ticks that are laboratory cultured. So it's called a xenodiagnosis.
So you mean if you have Lyme disease, you're basically walking around with eggs in you, and they're popping out every now and then? Is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry, what did you say? Popping? What do you mean by popping out?
Well, I mean, if you have Lyme disease, okay, it's because you've been bitten by a tick, and a tick has deposited eggs or something, right?
Yeah.
So those eggs, they keep generating, and they stay in there, or that's what causes the disease, or?
Well, when you get bitten by a tick, you're being injected with a live spirochete and the eggs. I mean, the tick can't say, I'm just going to inject spirochetes, because the spirochetes in any animal or human, as a spirochete dies, it converts to these forms called cysts or eggs or alforms or granules.
Okay.
And these can reproduce at an appropriate time with immunocompromised state of a patient, and they can come out as live spirochetes.
Okay, that's creepy. That's creepy. Sorry, but that's creepy.
It is creepy, yes. It's actually laying a survival form as it dies in your body.
All right. So, wow. You know what? I don't know what to say about that, because I'm really creeped out.
I know it's hard to realize that.
Yeah, me too.
It's
laying these things in your body, but that's what's happening.
And this is an epidemic right now. Right?
Oh, yes. It's an epidemic, and as you may be aware, the one single female tick can lay up to 3,000 eggs. And you think about it, in 2 years' time, those 3,000 eggs can be converted into ticks, mature in 2 years, and each one could lay 3,000 eggs. 3,000 times 3,000 is 9 million eggs. They go another 2 more years, you're multiplying 9 million times 9 million.
And they told 2 friends, and they.
But the amount of ticks out there in our society is just going to be so great that everybody and their uncle is going to get Lyme disease.
And all it takes is one infected tick.
One infected tick can lay 3,000 eggs.
And that can ruin the rest of your life.
It can ruin the rest of your life unless it's treated right away. The sooner you treat it, the better. If you don't treat it right away, then it gets into your body. It becomes more difficult to get rid of the infection and the eggs from your body.
And cannabinoids can do that.
I'm not going to say anything about that right now. All I can say is that when all my patients smoking felt better, they tried cannabidiol oil or paste, they felt even better. Dr. Eva Sappi, with our funding from our association in Hope, we raised money, and we were able to get Dr. Eva Sappi to actually kill the sparkies in the test tube. Okay, this is in vitro. And in vivo. The in vivo means in the body, in vitro means in the test tube. Okay, but it definitely killed it at 10 millimoles per cc. And we also were able to follow that up and kill the biofilm. The biofilm is produced by many organisms in the body, and it's a jelly-like substance or a polysaccharide substance that can protect the organism that produces it from antibodies, white blood cells, and antibiotics. So therefore, we have now been able to kill the biofilm, and the next step is the eggs. And again, this is all in vitro, in experimental studies. So I can't say what it's going to do unless we do double-blind studies in humans to show that there is definitely a benefit of one group getting sugar water and another group getting cannabidiol.
And are they doing these studies? Are you doing these studies?
No, it's hard to get people to do any studies when it comes to cannabidiol because it comes from marijuana.
I'll be happy to offer myself.
It's easy to get people to do the studies. It's hard to get the approval to do the studies.
Okay.
Right. I've applied grants for monies from different charities, and they won't give it to me. And a lot of them have a lot of money. Lots of them have millions of dollars, but they won't give me any. I've applied to different places with lots of money, but they won't give it to me because my name is sort of mud with the medical profession because of my stand on Lyme disease and the cannabidiol.
And that's funny, eh? You got the two of the most talked about subjects on the planet right now. And yet, you're mud.
Yeah,
I know. It's really funny because I've applied for different sources for monies, and they all say, "Oh yeah, we were looking for people to, do some research," and I can't get the money to do it. Although I'm getting some support from the local Hope people who are convinced of what I'm doing is correct, and we have raised the money to fund Dr. Eva Sappi at New Haven University, and we have been able to fund Dr. Pat McGeer at the UBC Medical School.
Wow.
But I've applied and asked, even on Facebook, for bacteriologists to help me out, but I don't get any help at all. Because it's such a bad name that it's got when it comes to cannabidiol, because it was originally found in marijuana. But it's found in hemp, and as I said, it's found in broccoli, carrots, blueberries, blackberries, and mother's milk. So it's a compound that we are given, and it's called endocannabinoids in our body, and we naturally have it. It's not only found in man, it's found in animals, and it's found in plants. So we were given this endocannabinoids, and I wonder why people suffered when it started to drop. Now, I had a brain tumor, and I wondered why I developed the brain tumor late in life. Then I realized that this could be the fact that my natural endocannabinoids were dropping, and it was not in a position to protect me from this tumor from growing. So when I first found out about my brain tumor, I accidentally bumped my head and I cracked my skull in a small spot. It felt like eggshells. I found out I had a tumor which is the size of 10 centimeters or 4 inches, and I had a MRI done 4 years before, and there was nothing there. But in 4 years, it had grown 4 inches. In other words, greater than an inch per year. And I had it taken out, and small fragment of it was so deep that they couldn't take it out. And they said, well, it'll probably grow, but we'll radiate every 6 months or so. We'll do a follow-up. In the meantime, when I developed my brain tumor, I looked up brain tumors, and I found out that cannabidiol in a child dissolved a tumor. In 2 months, it was gone to 50%. In 4 months, it was basically gone. And I thought, oh, this is a hoax. This is a fraud. This is a phony promotion. So I finally had the MRI sent to me, and it was done at a reputable university hospital. And I thought, well, gee, it's got to be something. And then that's when I looked up Dr. Rafael Maichulam, and he's been studying it for 30 years. And I became thoroughly convinced that all these people who have severe convulsive children, you've probably seen stories about children who are convulsing, not responding to the usual Dilantin and phenobarb and carbazamapine, tegretol, and all these modern drugs would not control the seizures. And then you may have heard of Charlotte's Web. Well, they went from multiple anticonvulsants, and they went to Colorado and got the Stanley brothers to give them the cannabidiol, and they were amazed because this child was seizing every 15 to 20 minutes, and they had to give rectal Valium to stop it in massive doses. It probably used to knock them out, and they had to probably do CPR every time the amount of the Valium was built up in the body. They just knocked them right out. So the only way they could stop it was the rectal injection of the Valium, and they took the child with the rectal Valium every 15 to 20 minutes, got down to Colorado, got some of the cannabidiol, and they had somebody prepare it for them into the dropper form, and they got a hotel in Denver, Colorado, and they were sort of fearful of what might happen because they were warned about the dangers of and the non-effectiveness of like anticonvulsant. But what happened was in 20 minutes, the child did not seize after 2 drops of the cannabis drops. And this went on for an hour. And this is the first time in their life they'd experienced a lapse in the epileptic forms. And then the whole night went by. And they had a twin sister, and the twin sister stated that her twin did not have a seizure. And this went on for a couple of weeks, and they only had a few minor seizures, which convinced me that there was something very, very anticonvulsive that modern medicine wasn't providing. And so that this child was actually kept in Colorado for a while, and I think they're back home now in Connecticut. But they call it the Charlotte's Web because it was such a miraculous treatment for the convulsive seizures that were not controlled with modern medicine. And I have a lady in the Burnaby area. Her son was having seizures too, and I said, well, think of Charlotte's Web, look up Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and see what he did, and found out. And she was seeing a neurologist with her son seizuring every day, off and on, requiring hospital visits for intravenous massive doses of Valium. And she started to give the cannabidiol, and the seizures now, in the last 2 years, I think there's only about a dozen attacks for the whole entire time. So there's a big, big improvement. So we've got to really, really convince the medical world not to be so divided in their attitude about this great medicinal product.
Yeah, but diseases can't be cured, and you can't come out with a plant that can cure diseases, so that's why doctors are there. I have a question for you. Do you do your own extractions to get your cannabidiol, or how do you know that that's what you're actually getting?
No, I don't do any of that. There's lots of people producing it. My studies indicate that the only problem I can see is if you have too high a THC, then you get the psychoactive, sedative, euphoric effect.
Right.
Cannabis.
But that's the only real drawback, really, of that whole ingesting whole plant oil is the psychoactive effect of THC.
I don't mind that drawback.
No, some people don't.
I recommend the high CBD and the lower THC. Now, if you take THC long enough, you can bypass the sedation and the side effects from it.
Right.
But to start off with, I would say high CBD, lower THC, and as you get used to it, you can tolerate the higher THC. They both have medicinal value, whether it's cancer or seizures. They both have medicinal value. The only side effect from THC is the fact that it has the psychoactive effect, and I don't know. We don't know enough about the psychoneural pathways in people under the age of, say, 24. Whether it affects it when your brain is still developing. So I would say use it if you have no choice, and in an emergency like seizures or cancer, well, then you've got to use it.
I use it.
But what we've been having great success on this coast with using suppositories and going into first pass blood so that it doesn't convert to hydroxy-11 THC at the liver. And we seem to be treating a lot of people with a lot less cannabis because of it. Would that be more advantageous for Lyme disease, do you think?
Well, the studies that we've got and people donated were the cannibal origin, and some of them had some THC in it, and we're studying both those with cannabis and THC and those with only CBD.
Right. See, I've been ingesting oil every day since 2009, so.
Yeah. Well, as I say, a lot of people can take the high THC, especially if they build it up gradually. When it first came out, THC was only about 1% or less, and the people are getting the euphoric psychoactive effect with the lower doses. But as you get used to it, then you can tolerate the higher doses.
Right.
But if you start immediately with the high TSH, you're going to get the sedative psychoactive effect.
Yeah, I never advise anybody to start out at a high dose. That just scares them off.
Start off with a low dose and gradually work it up, then you won't get the same psychoactive effect.
Yeah. Well, we're about halfway through the show, and it's probably time for us to get a quick break in here and possibly some news.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I'm going to try and load up the news, but I don't know if this is going to work or not. It doesn't seem like it's the right file. Chris?
Well, I'll stand by. And,
you stand by, and we'll get a quick break in, and people can run into the washroom, and then we can get back at this.
Yep. We'll be right back. This is the 420 Radio Show. We're live at LifestyleRadio.net and .ca. If you've got a question for the doctor or anybody else on the panel, come on in and ask. Marcel's in there, and he'll forward the question. We're going to listen to some Peter Tosh, hopefully some news, and then we'll be back.
Warning. The Surgeon General warns. Cigarette smoking is dangerous. Dangerous. Hazard to your health. Does that mean anything to you? Then legalize marijuana. Right here in Jamaica, Them say it cure glaucoma, I'm an bush doctor, So there'll be no more smoking more disrespect for humanity. Legalize marijuana. Down here in Jamaica, can build up a failing economy. Eliminate the slavish mentality. So there'll be no more illegal humiliation and no more police intervention. Legalize marijuana down here in sweet Jamaica. Only cure for glaucoma. I'm an Addy Bush doctor, and there'll be no more need to smoke and hide when you know you're taking a legal ride. So legalize marijuana down here in Jamaica. It's the only cure for glaucoma.
Many, the side effects of using prescription.
The National Task Force on Medicinal Cannabis is a group of not-for-profit organizations dedicated to influencing government policy with factual evidence. Our mission is to ensure that a constitutional medical program is developed that will address the concerns of all Canadians that require therapeutic cannabis. The task force is looking for dedicated people who are willing to contribute to our cause. We have formed this task force to foster a unified approach and focus on lobbying the federal government and Health Canada. We represent the combined expertise of thousands of patients with more than a decade of experience. As a task force participant, you, your business, or your group will have an opportunity to show that you care and offer your unique skills to promote the cause. If you would like to get involved, go to medcanataskforce.org. That's medcanataskforce.org and use the Contact Us link to get started. Help us help you.
Good evening. I'm Coulter Wonkite. I'm already into the 420, damn it.
Welcome to the 420 show, and this is your 420 seconds of news with Chris Backer. More than 100 medical marijuana dispensaries in Vancouver are facing enforcement action starting Saturday. The city's chief licensing inspector, Andrea Thomas, said this week that inspectors will initially hand out $250 tickets to non-compliant shops. Thomas said the city can take legal action by seeking an injunction at BC Supreme Court to shut down the stores. Last October, the city refused 140 of the 176 preliminary development permit applications for medical marijuana-related businesses because they were not permitted zones or did not meet distancing regulations from schools, community centers, youth facilities, or an other medical marijuana facility. Stores already open at the time of refusal have been allowed to operate for 6 months while they search for new sites. However, those stores must be closed by Saturday if they haven't found a new location and submitted a revised application. Only 7 have been issued development permits, with another 13 applications under review. The city is currently processing 3 business license applications. The first license is expected to be issued within a month. An annual license fee is $1,000 for not-profit medical marijuana compassion clubs and a $30,000 for medical marijuana retail dealers. One of Vancouver's oldest medical marijuana dispensaries is vowing to defy the order to lock up shop by midnight tonight after being refused under the city's new regulatory regime. "We're not going to close," Dana Larson, the founding director of the medicinal marijuana dispensary, said. "We've not been approved yet," he added, pointing out that the not-for-profit society operates 2 dispensaries, one on Hastings, which opened in 2007, and another on Thurlow, opened in 2010. Both were rejected under the city's new regulations for pot dispensaries. "We were the 3rd one in the city and the first to call ourselves a dispensary," Larson said. The new regulations adopted in June last year require dispensaries to be at least 300 meters from schools, community centers, and youth facilities or another medical marijuana shop. The Thurlow location was found to be 270 meters from a learning annex. "The kids are all under 10 and they're not going to be out looking for marijuana," Larson said of the annex, and I agree with you. Officers in tactical gear descended on N.J. Weidman's joint in Trenton Wednesday afternoon, making multiple arrests and shutting down the eatery. Owner Ed Fortune, better known as N.J. Weidman, opened up the eatery across from City Hall to fanfare last year. The building and adjacent Liberty Bell Sanctuary, a cannabis church he runs, were sealed off with police tape Wednesday as officers with assault rifles investigated. A Trenton police spokesman, though, said in March that police had received numerous citizens' complaints from the area at times, and the businesses were open after 11 p.m., which is in violation of a city ordinance that requires some establishments to close down at 11 p.m. "Our temple is an alternative religious organization that keeps night hours. We cater to a late-night congregation," Fortune wrote in the complaint. "We are not a business but a temple. We are open 24 hours a day." And this, in other news, I originally thought this story was complete bullshit, but surprise, apparently it's true. In Salt Lake City, Utah, Governor Gary Herbert signed a resolution declaring pornography illegal as a public health crisis. "This is a historic day for the good, clean living people who call the state of Utah home," Herbert told reporters. "This new law will protect our children and make our state pure from the heathens who go against God's will." The resolution calls for increased education, prevention, research, law enforcement, and policy change at the community and societal level. Under the new law, those living in Utah who possess pornography of any kind, that being a magazine or viewing pornographic material online, will face harsh fines and even jail time for repeat offenders. Sarah Bradley, a spokesperson for Socket Forward, a group that provides homeless and those less fortunate with brand new socks, told CBS News that she does not agree with the new law. This ridiculous law is going to imprison a lot of people in the state, Bradley said. The fact is, people in Utah are some of the biggest users of online pornography in the country, according to Pornhub.com. Real nice, Mormons. Make sure you keep your hands above the covers while you sleep, but not before clearing your browser history first, Bradley continued. Also, thank you to everyone that has supported our cause in giving new socks to the homeless. It means so much. Please give what you can. Paul Horner, a spokesman for the governor's office, spoke to the reporters about the fines and possible jail time involved with the new law. First-time offenders will see fines of $100 to $500 depending on the quantity of pornography or the amount of digital graphic content seized on the criminal's computer. Repeat offenders can expect 30 days in jail or worse, depending on what type of pornography is found in the individual's possession. Missionary-style pornography will result in a fine of up to 30 days in jail, while pornography that involves any kind of homogeneous, that being sodomy or devil-worshipping, will result in long-term prison sentences. Law enforcement will also be closely working with local ISPs and the NSA to monitor those who search out porn on the internet. We will win this war on porn and masturbation. FAPI, apparently, the anti-masturbation dolphin, and a mascot for the Christian organization that travels around the country educating children about the dangers and consequences of masturbation, told CBS News that he believes in what Utah is doing, and I believe he's nuts. Senate House of Representatives Speaker Paul Ryan called on Wednesday for an end to Obamacare's financial protections for people with serious medical conditions, saying these consumers should be placed in high-risk pools. The rule, a cornerstone of President Barack Obama's Affordable Care Act, has been praised by patient advocates for providing access to medical care for people who previously could not afford private health insurance. The Affordable Care Act also bars insurance from excluding coverage for pre-existing conditions. Less than 10% of people under 65 fall in the category of what we call people with pre-existing conditions, who are really kind of uninsurable, Ryan, a Wisconsin Republican, told a student audience at Georgetown University. Let's fund risk pools at the state level to subsidize their coverage so that they can afford to get affordable coverage, he said. You dramatically lower the price for everyone else. You make health insurance so much more affordable, so much more competitive, and open to competition. High-risk pools, by the way, have existed since before the health care law and are a state-level entity that guarantees coverage for people with health problems. Analysts say that they can be prohibitively expensive and offer less than optimal health coverage. Hyacinth, a company that focuses on using biology to solve problems, in the cannabis industry, we see the cannabinoids themselves as a technology which, when applied properly, can benefit a lot of people, said Kevin Chen, co-founder of the company. The eureka moment occurred when Hyacinth researchers were able to create cannabinoids within genetically engineered yeast. Producing the active components of cannabis using our platform means that we can improve on existing treatments and develop new ones by having better options and control over what ingredients go into the end product. Chen feels the current medical marijuana is crude, falling short of its full potential. I fully appreciate the benefit that people get today from using medical marijuana, but it can do so much more and help a lot more people if we develop it further. We need to be able to work with more of the cannabinoids and produce more in specific formulations to treat different diseases. And with Passover officially underway, beginning 2 days after 420 and ending Saturday, April 30th, a highly regarded rabbi representing the Judaic tribe in Israel has officially declared cannabis is kosher to consume during the Jewish Face High holiday. Per the World Post, Rabbi Chaim Chanivsky was asked his opinion regarding the kosher status of cannabis by a group of Israeli marijuana reformers in preparation for the 8-day festival. The rabbi was seen leaning forward and taking a deep whiff of the freshly harvested flower and blessing it, declaring this cannabis has a healing scent. Welcome to the 420 Show, and this is your 420 seconds of news with Chris Backer. More than 100 medical marijuana dispensaries in Vancouver are facing enforcement action starting Saturday. The city's chief licensing inspector, Andrea Toma, said this week that inspectors will initially hand out $250 tickets to non-compliant shops. Thomas said the city can take legal action by seeking an injunction at BC Supreme Court to shut down the stores. Last October, the city refused 140 of the 176 preliminary development permit applications for medical marijuana-related businesses because they were not permitted zones or did not meet distancing regulations from schools, community centers, youth facilities, or an other medical marijuana facility. Stores already open at the time of refusal have been allowed to operate for 6 months while they search for new sites. However, those stores must be closed by Saturday if they haven't.
Growing your own vegetables, flowers, or even medicinal plants can be a challenge without the right equipment and proper know-how. At BMA Hydroponics, not only are they your urban horticultural experts and suppliers, but their staff holds the customer's needs paramount to making a sale. Family-owned with decades of experience and knowledge, they offer free advice in person, by phone, or email. BMA Hydroponics wants to ensure you have the advice you need, which is why you'll find tips and tricks on different ways to grow, like wick, ebb and flow, drip, or aeroponic system, as well as other helpful links at bmahydroponics.com. If you can't find what you're looking for, just let them know, and they'll do everything they can to get what you're looking for. At BMA Hydroponics, each staff member also possesses a federal exemptee MMAR license, making their strong suit empathy, experience, and dedication to their customers. Because when you know how to grow, you'll have results that make you proud. BMA Hydroponics in Belleville, Ontario. Visit bmahydroponics.com.
A message from BNA Hydroponics.
.com.
Hey, look, there's the owner right there.
There he is, wave.
Hello. This is the 420 radio show. I don't know, is there many people in the chat room, buddy?
Yeah, actually, there's a few in there.
Awesome. Do we have any
I
questions?
got lots of questions for the doctor.
Okay, I just want to ask one question, if you don't mind. Are you there, Doc?
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. Are there any other ways to get Lyme disease other than from ticks?
Well, they're finding that the possibility of mosquitoes, black flies, sand flies, and possibly any insect, body lice, that would attack a deer mice, and not only deer mice, the squirrels, chipmunks, shrews, are thought to carry the Lyme spirochete. So if any insect bites any of those animals, which was originally thought to be just deer mice, I think a lot of animals, the rodent family, can carry this Lyme spirochete, and with all the other insects that are biting these animals, and again, biting humans and other animals, can spread the disease. So I don't think it's just straight ticks anymore. We have to consider a lot of other, say, vector-borne diseases that can bite an infected animal or human and spread it to other man and or human.
So we're proverbially fucked, basically. I mean, no matter which way you look at it.
Yeah, there's no way we're ever going to eradicate it, that's for sure.
You know?
Well, I don't know what the answer is, but possibly some kind of virus that might attack the Lyme spirochete, maybe a vaccination.
Oh, good. More shots. Cool.
The only thing wrong with vaccines is...
So here's the big question that I have for you before I ask all the ones from the chat room. Where did Lyme disease come from?
Well, it's been found in people who had died 5,000 and 1,000 years ago in those mummies that were described, so that the disease has been around for a long time, and it didn't spread until there was a warming effect of the world. That's when it really became rampant, because the 3,000 eggs that are averaging out on a female tick, most of them are dying when the sub-zero weather went for 2 or 3 weeks or longer. But now it's not cold enough to kill them off, so it's not just the ticks that are a concern. They've got the pine beetles and all sorts of mosquitoes and all sorts of insects that can carry vector-borne diseases. That's going to be quite rampant. And as the world gets warmer and warmer, it's going to increase all those insects. So we've got a real major problem. So when they discuss the warming effects of the world, they shouldn't be concerned just with some of the vegetation and the flooding. They've got to be worried about the increase in the vector-borne infections and diseases.
I think that answered that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read an article that Utsu the Iceman actually tested positive for Lyme disease. The guy they found frozen up in the Austrian or the Italian Alps or Austrian Alps.
There was positive PCR for the Lyme spirochetes found in the 5,000-year-old frozen person, and another one about 1,000-year-old. So it's been around, but not as spread out as it is since the warming effect of the world, which started, I'd say, in the 1970s and 80s. It really started to warm up. And we're losing our ice fields, and as soon as we lose our ice fields, the world's going to get even warmer, and vector-borne diseases are going to really, really be rampant. And we're not really prepared. The medical students are not prepared to treat Lyme disease, and they're calling it MS or fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome or mental problems, which is very unfortunate because the doctors are not educated. I do educate at the naturopathic medical school in Westminster, the Boucher Institute for Medical Students, and they're naturopathic, and they asked me to give a talk about 6 years ago, and they were quite impressed with what I showed them, and showing that the patients who were treated with 1 month of antibiotics, IV or oral, failed to improve, and yet after 3 months of IV, they did improve. And I presented this to the federal government and also presented it to the Manitoba Health Unit, and they were quite impressed at the graph showing 1 month of treatment giving a 10% cure, 2 months of treatment IV gave 50% cure, and 3 months of IV gave 8 months plus cure. So that the fact that the 1 month is inadequate, I presented that at the Vancouver Chronic Complex Diseases Clinic, and I was hoping that they would spread it and give it to the Center of Disease Control. In fact, Centers of the Disease Control people were there, but nothing has been done. And yet I gave them the evidence that 1 month didn't work on these 3 cases I had referred to infectious disease doctors, and yet 3 months of IV definitely worked. But unfortunately, nothing has come of it. It's very sad when you don't get the response. In Manitoba, we had a meeting in March the 20th of 2012, and at that time we had an equal representation of Lyme literate doctors and Lyme illiterate doctors. And the fact that some of the doctors there believed that it was only 30 days of antibiotic was needed, and after that it was a syndrome, I had to get up and tell them that they're wrong. That Dr. Pat McGeer have proven that in chronic fatigue syndrome cases who died with Alzheimer's diagnosis, the brain biopsy showed the actual spirochete in the brain after these people had died. And again, we have to follow up on these studies and get some studies done that would really open the eyes of the medical world, because we're still dug in about the fact that there's no Lyme disease around and that it's all mental. Well, it's really sad because a lot of the patients that I was seeing were quite depressed, and they were all on antidepressants. But a lot of them got better with the use of long-term antibiotics.
These spirochete you refer to there, can you detect them in the body before you die? I guess is the question that I want to ask.
Well, the advanced labs in the States by Dr. Joseph Burscano found that they could take the blood samples of patients with suspected Lyme disease and actually grow the spirochete, which is an absolutely positive test. And they could also take the blood and test it with the PCR test, which is specific for the antigens of Lyme disease, and that is an absolutely positive test.
Right.
So we got a long way to go, though.
And that's only one place that's
100%.
That's only one place that's available?
No, Germany does testing as well.
Yeah, I think Germany, there's more and more labs trying the culture method that the advanced labs came up with quite a few years ago. And
Nancy says
positive,
that the ELISpot test in
but the other tests
Germany
are so inadequate that we have a long way to go have a proper test that we can be absolutely sure of.
So which would be a better doctor to use if you suspect that you have Lyme, a medical doctor or a naturopathic doctor?
Well, I've been teaching at the Boucher Institute for Naturopathic Physicians for 5 years, and they're on board, and I'm training them all the time and how to give not only the oral antibiotics, but also the intravenous antibiotics as well. And it's a blessing that we have them, because right now the medical world is so divided on Lyme disease that it's rather sad that we sit back and just, hesitant about taking on anything new. Just like HIV was dragged out and people were dying all the time, now there's hardly anybody dying at all with HIV. And it's the same with Lyme disease. There's people dragging their feet on that, and there's a lot of people dragging their feet on cannabinoid products. And yet, cannabinoid products are going to be the answer to a lot of diseases.
Right. I agree. It works for me.
Yeah.
It's been
me
coming
too.
out. I have a patient who had a blood disorder and getting transfusions every 9 days, 2 units of blood every 9 days, and platelets every 12 days. And he was told that in 1994 that he only had a few months to live. Well, his knowledge of the CBD, and when I told him I was taking the CBD from hemp, he started, and his blood transfusions went from 9 to 14 to 17 to 2 months. Now it's 4 months apart, so that he's now starting to produce his own blood with the cannabidiol. And also, he only had 2 units of platelets, and he hasn't been able to consider low enough to take any more platelets, which he was getting every 12 days. So he's had nearly a year and a half of extra life, because he was supposed to be dead in September of 2014. So he's had couple of years, nearly 2 years of extra life that he wouldn't have had. I still don't know. It's so new that is it possible that the antibiotic effect or the healing effect of cannabidiol, is there going to be like anything else, like penicillin was in vogue for a long time, but then with time, a lot of people became allergic to it, or the germs became resistant to it. And that's a possibility that what could be working right now with our studies could be okay now, but we don't know down the line, 10 years from now, we may find that the reverse becomes just like penicillin did. It sort of went out of style, and we have to get other antibiotics.
I have a question about prevention. It kind of relates back to my dog. We lived in Prince Edward County in Ontario. It's probably one of the first hotbeds for Lyme disease and Lyme-carrying ticks. While we were there, we used to get ticks off them, right from spring till fall, as big as grapes. And we used to use something called a tick lasso to remove them. It was like a ballpoint pen, and you pressed on the top, and a little piece of loop of like fishing line came out the end, and you wrapped that around the base of the neck of the tick and twisted, and it usually got the whole head out and everything, but obviously my dog got Lyme disease, so it couldn't have worked every time. Is there a method that you recommend for removing ticks?
The photograph of the mouth parts of the tick that I put on Facebook?
Yeah, they've got a lot of little hooks in there.
You see those barbs that come out on the sides of the tick's flat mouth? It's like a scalpel blade. It's flat, so it goes into the body flat like a scalpel blade, and then on the sides it's got these barbs. So if you start tugging on that, it's going to just open up the barbs more, and it's going to break off at the base. So you've got to be very careful that if you take it out, that the barbs are still not out extended, but flattened up against the side of the mouth. If you look up the Murakami tick removal, you'll see how the ticks will come out on their own, but it drops its own barbs flat against its mouth parts, and it can just slip out. But with the barbs hooks, like a barb hook, and there's about half a dozen to a dozen on each side of its mouth, if it's still outwards, it's not going to be able to pull out. It'll break off at the base of the mouth. Simple physics.
So what do you do then? How do you get them out?
You got to get the barbs to flatten right out, and then let it pull out.
Okay, but how do you get them to flatten out?
Well, if you look at my first two techniques, one is called the blister method. It's a xylocaine and adrenaline injected right underneath the mouth of the tick. The tick is tasting xylocaine and adrenaline, and is looking for blood. So it'll flatten its barbs out, and it'll come out on its own. Look up Murakami tick removal in the internet. You'll see it there. And the other method that I recommend is the drinking straw and the thread. You approach the tick from behind at 45 degrees, put a thread or a suture underneath the straw and make a single knot, and that will grab the tick at the base of the mouth where the mouth parts start. And if you just tease it, the barbs will flatten right out, and it'll come right out. And if you pull it off the thread, the single knot, if it drops off the knot, it means that you've broken off the mouthpiece. But if it stays on and you have to take it off the barb, off the single knot, with a Q-tip, you'll see that the mouth parts are still intact. And that's the way you can tell if it's doing the proper job.
I guess we'll look that up and share that on the website, Al, so that people can find it.
Yeah, if you put Murakami tick removal, you'll get right on my website.
All right, yeah, we'll get that up for you. I've seen on TV late at night, the infomercials. They've got these tick removing things that kind of slip around it, and then you twist it and it pulls it out.
But you just imagine a flat blade.
Yes.
In the side of the body.
Yes.
With hooks on both sides. It's going to break it right off.
Yeah. So then what happens then if you break it off?
Well, the mouth parts have been found have salivary glands in that mouth part that drops off. The infection is right in it. So sometimes you have to dig it out or treat with adequate antibiotics to make sure that you treat all the infection in that part. And you might have to dig it out under local anesthetic.
Wow.
Dig it out, put a big glob of cannabis.
I think I'm going to stay out of the wood.
If the tick will break off, it's going to reinfect the host, whether it's an animal or a man, over and over and over again.
I'm just going to stay home from now on.
Yeah, really. I know somebody had told me that if you take like a blob of Vaseline and put it over top, that the tick will actually back itself out. Is that true?
It can, but what happens to anything if you smother it and can't breathe?
It dies.
It defecates, urinates, and vomits. And that applies to any sort of man, animal, or insect. So if you smother it, it'll die.
Oh, well, we don't want that either then.
Oh, because most animals that are threatened or suffocated are going to defecate, urinate, and vomit. And that's going to just spread the infection.
Yum.
I'm thoroughly grossed out now. Thoroughly.
Well, we have to be concerned.
Yes, of course.
Advising caution rather than panic.
Yes. It's, cannabis will help, obviously.
Well, I say in vitro studies in the test tube that kill the spirochete, equivalent to doxycycline, which is a common drug used for. In fact, in our studies, we did a comparative study of the killing effect of doxycycline versus 10 millimoles of cannabidiol in solution, and it was just about equivalent to doxycycline in a therapeutic dose. In fact, a combination of the low dose of cannabidiol with the doxycycline had a even a better killing effect.
Can you spray it? Like, can you say take a tincture and spray it on it, and hopefully it'll leave? Like, would that?
Oh, you mean if it ticks on your body?
Yeah.
Well, if you have a tincture, you might suffocate it, and that's nausea and vomiting and defecation.
Yep. All right.
So if you get a tick and you pull it off, a lot of people do, and there's a little bit of a red mark, then you could use the cannabidiol on that spot because it absorbs right through the skin.
Okay.
And in our studies, as I say, it killed the Lyme spirochete and the biofilm. So if it kills the biofilm and the spirochete after the tick's been taken off and you got a red rash, it wouldn't hurt to put the ointment on there because it does absorb right through the skin, whether it's out under the tongue or through the skin or vaporized. It absorbs very quickly within 15-20 minutes under the tongue. It's pretty well gone and absorbed directly into the blood. If you put it on your skin, it'll absorb through that spot as well. And it may be the answer to a ring, the erythema migrans rash ring may respond to the cannabidiol alone. But right now I tell everybody to get the antibiotic for 1 month after a bite, as well as if you got the cannabidiol, put it right on the rash.
Okay.
But we have to do studies to see if the cannabidiol ointment alone will be sufficient to kill the spirochete.
Rub it up. What's the name of the song there? Rub it up, slip it on, and rub it round or something like that?
I would say get the antibiotic for a month.
Yep.
If you get tip and a rash develops, you get antibiotics for a month, plus the cannabidiol paste if you got it, and put it right on the rash.
So if somebody is sitting there going, okay, I've been listening to these people talk about this for the last 2.5 hours, hour and a half, and I think that I've got some concern. What would you suggest they do? Get to the doctor, take some initiative on their own?
If a person is real concerned, anybody can call me, and I'll give them advice.
Okay.
They can call me anytime, and they just leave a number, and I'll get back to them, and I do that every day.
Okay.
So if they got concerns and want to discuss anything with me, that's fine. Just leave their number on that number.
Awesome.
A lot of work.
Is there a time limit? Like, I mean, if you say you get bit by a tick and you don't realize that you've been infected and say a year goes by or 2 years go by, is there a point at which antibiotics are no longer effective and you've kind of got Lyme disease for life?
It depends. There's over 300 strains of this Lyme spirochete. When it first came out, it was very sensitive to antibiotics. But lately, as you can go on and use the antibiotics, there seems to be more resistant forms of the disease, reading more combinations and higher doses of the antibiotic, so that it's probably mutating to the point where it becomes more resistant and more difficult to treat. But some of the when it first came out, it was quite responsive to the antibiotics. But as time goes on, I think there's resistance developing.
Marcel, do you have any more questions from the chat room?
There was one more. Oh, the question was, is it only Lyme you have to worry about from tick bites? Is there any other co-infections?
Oh, there's about 10 different organisms now. And the more common one is ehrlichiosis, and that's characterized by a drop in the white count, hemorrhaging, that's caused hemorrhage, and it's got all the symptoms of Lyme disease, but the drop in the white count, if you have that, you've got to suspect that it could be ehrlichiosis. And then you have temperature variations. Babesiosis, you've got different things like night sweats, severe night sweats like malaria, and sweating to the point where you're saturating your clothes and pillow sheets. And you do get a cough. It inflames the lungs, and you get an asthmatic cough. And if you get an asthmatic cough and night sweats, you've got to assume that it could be babesiosis. And that is usually associated with severe headaches as well. So if you get these symptoms, you need to treat the babesiosis first, because the babesiosis interferes with the treatment of Lyme. If you go to Lyme treatment without treating the babesiosis, it's a waste of time. The next one is Bartonella. This one, you can get it from cat scratch fever. You've probably heard of it. But it can cause swollen glands. It can cause a peculiar white linear rash, which can be inflamed or pale, and it can cause pain in the extremities. So if you've got swollen glands in the neck or in the axilla or in the groin with a rash and discomfort in the lower extremities, you got to think of Bartonella. Rocky Mountain spotted fever is characterized by a multiple rash all over the body, and there's things like what they're finding out, like Western Nile virus is now being found in the ticks. There's babesiosis, brucellosis. These are all new, and paralytic fever. In fact, there was 5 cases of paralytic fever in children who had been bitten by ticks, and they found that while the wood tick's parts are in the body, that child became paralyzed. But the paralytic poison is released from the germ and released through the broken parts of the tick, and until you take that tick part out, there would be a paralysis. It's called a tick paralysis fever. So
once the remaining tick parts are removed, is the patient able to recover from that paralysis?
If they take that tick part out, yes.
Oh, really?
You got to get rid of that tick part. That's the most important thing. There was actually 5 cases in the Okanagan, 2 in Vancouver just a few years ago, and it was the tick paralysis. And once they cleared the tick out of the body, then the paralysis stopped immediately. It's a neurotoxin that is released by this organism.
How do you know if you have a tick?
You don't always know. The unfortunate part of the tick is that the nymphal stage is the size of a dot. So if you get bitten by a tick but the size of a dot, or the nymphal stage is just as infectious as the adult female, you won't even know it, because the size of a dot could be behind the back of your head. You wouldn't even know there's a tick there. And yet you can get infected by the nymphal stage just as quickly as you can from the fully adult female tick. And it's only the females that bite. It's normal, like mosquitoes. It's always the female that bites. It needs the blood to complete their sexual cycle. But as I say, a lot of people say, "Oh, if you don't have a tick bite and a rash, you don't have Lyme." That's ridiculous, because the nymphal stage is so small, and the size of the inoculum from the bite is so minimal that you don't even develop a ring. It just passes a little pimple, and you won't even know it. So anybody says, "Oh, you haven't a tick bite, and you haven't a rash," they're not the correct diagnosis of Lyme disease.
Yeah, I'm going to be checking everything now.
It's kind of scary, isn't it? I've seen them on when we've taken them off of our dog. There would be like one adult tick, and then there would be like 2 or 3 little baby ticks, all in the same holes, all sucking the same juice at the same time.
Well, the incidence of Lyme disease is going to be dramatically increasing, and we're not prepared for it in the medical schools. I'm teaching at the naturopathic medical school, and they're prepared. In fact, we have more doctors getting treatment from naturopathic physicians than from medical doctors. But our education is way behind.
Have you heard anything about sexual transmission of Lyme disease? Like human-to-human sexual transmission?
Syphilis was one encounter, you got syphilis. But with Lyme disease, you have to be with a partner for a little while, and it's easier for the male to transmit it than the female to transmit it, because, of course, your sperms are being injected into the female, so therefore you're more likely to get it from a male rather than from a female. But it's still reported cases of sexual transmission, and also intrauterine transmission as well. You can get transmission that way. And babies are born with the disease, and they've shown how spirochetes can invade the blood vessels and go right through some of the walls like a corkscrew. And Dr. Chaconis in Alberta, he found that these spirochetes have a highly invasive nature in all sorts of tissue, and the placenta is no different. So sexually transmitted, and also placental transmission as well.
You'll never hide.
They're really insidious, aren't they? I mean, it's just
the thing is, the eggs don't travel through the muscles of the placenta, but the spirochetes do. So if you take a low dose of antibiotic, not a heavy dose, spirochete suppressed, then it will prevent transmission. And I treated in the past about 24 cases of pregnancies with low-dose antibiotics, and usually that's Cept and Zithromax, and that's the standard treatment that is used internationally. And it'll prevent the transmission of the spirochete, prevent it from multiplying and going through the placenta. And it's just surprising how that low dose of antibiotic will keep the spirochete from spreading to the newborn.
I'm starting to think that this is so much bigger an epidemic than anybody could ever frigging imagine at this point.
Think how much blood is sitting in the blood bank that's infected.
What's happening?
Oh God! Don't even.
Nancy did that to me in the chat room.
No, don't even think about things like that. That's so scary. So if
you could have a blood bank full.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask. If you go and give blood, is that something that would show up?
That's the unfortunate part. If the blood test is not picking it up, then you're going to be transmitting it.
So you could. So then somebody needs a
We have to have a better testing technique for picking up the possibility that a person could be a silent carrier of the Lyme spirochete. Because if we do the test right now, we're not picking up a majority of them.
I'm starting to get upset.
Or not
now.
so silent, just misdiagnosed.
This is
undiagnosed.
ridiculous.
Like, how many of us have these mystery diseases and symptoms that nobody can find? Like, I can't tell you how many people I know that have autoimmune issues, quote-unquote diseases, that there's no cause, no reason. As you said, doctor, things like fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome and all these antibody diseases, I guess you call them, right? Because, like, that's what I have. I was told it was a chronic idiopathic demyelinating symmetric peripheral neuropathy, for God's sake. What the hell is that?
Oh,
my body's eating the coating off my nerves because of something.
Yeah. Well, you should rule out the vector-borne diseases, especially Lyme disease.
Nancy says the ELISA test
Well,
is
I'm starting to think I should, yes.
Yeah,
Well,
Nancy
don't forget,
says the ELISA test is
federal government has said it's a
50%
clinical
accurate, so
diagnosis,
why not?
not a lab diagnosis, and you don't have to have a positive lab test to treat Lyme disease. You could look it up in the federal health guidelines about it being a clinical diagnosis, and a lot of people still stress if you don't have a positive ELISA, you don't have Lyme disease. That's crazy.
Well, yeah,
I have
only
3 mystery
50%.
diagnoses. When you get to a point where you have 3 mystery diagnoses, I have IBS because they can't find anything else. I have fibromyalgia because they can't find anything else. And I have that other thing I said because they can't find anything else.
Have you got they can't find anything else?
All they told me is I've had biopsies, and they tell me that my body's eating the coating off my nerves from my toes on up. They have no idea why. They have no idea what's causing it. They have nothing that they can do about it. Oh, well.
Yep, I got the same thing.
I got Cannabis. I got ignore it.
Well, yes, some disease causing it.
Yeah, I was told they can't do anything about it. Just have to figure out how to live with the pain.
I was having issues with my my left ear. I went to an ear, nose, and throat clinic because it felt like a chronic ear something, right? And they looked, they found no lesions, they found nothing. They did the scope down my throat, they did the thing in my ear. They would have put a pickle in my ear if they could have. They said, I said, so what am I supposed to do about my ear? She said, does it hurt? No, not really. Can you hear? Yeah. Ignore it.
Nah.
Flat out. This is from an ENT doctor. So,
nice.
At Sunnybrook.
Well, it's got to be improvement in the big medical divide, and I think it's slowly going to come around. There's more and more people giving their story of all the tragedies of misdiagnosis, and then all of a sudden finding out it's Lyme disease. And I really think it's coming to a point of no return, and I think the doctors have to sit down and talk about it. They can't just sit down and keep denying it anymore.
It sounds like that it truly is something that's going to become a problem. I mean, one year we're worried about SARS, and then the next we're worried about West Nile, and mosquitoes are the big thing, and now ticks are the big thing.
And there's Zika too. But how many people have died from Zika? How would that compare to Lyme disease? And look at all the attention that's being focused on Zika.
Yeah. You see, sometimes I wish that Lyme disease had a more higher mortality, and then we would get more action. But because it's so insidious, and the mortality is low and the morbidity is high, we don't worry about morbidity disease, and therefore, if you get a disease that kills, then we're going to spend a lot of money. But they spend very little money on Lyme disease because the mortality isn't high enough to be concerned. And yet, in the long run, the result is the same. If they're going to commit suicide, it's still a death from the same problem, the Lyme disease.
Yeah.
And we've got it now.
And there you go. That's another one of the critical issues nowadays is the suicide rate. And meanwhile, they're just looking right on past all these things that could be, critical points in the problems that we're having. I'm amazed. Totally amazed.
Nancy's in the chat room saying that you can get your own testing done at Armin Labs out of Germany without a doctor.
Really?
Yeah. You don't need a doctor.
I bet you it's expensive though.
Is it a blood test or what?
We need that information from Nancy then.
Yeah, I'll get that for you. They send you a syringe with the kit, and you take your own blood sample and send it back.
Huh.
Well, that would be awesome.
She says she went to a lab to get the blood drawn, but hey, you want blood drawn? I'll draw it out of you.
Well, I'm starting to think after this conversation that if you have suspicion, I think we need to start going to our naturopaths.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, the only naturopathic doctors that have privileges of prescribing antibiotics and giving IVs are the ones in BC. So if they want to come and get treatment here, the naturopathic doctors are on board because there's quite a number of naturopathic doctors who have trained, and they can give antibiotics, and they can even give IVs. I couldn't even give IVs for a long term, even as an MD. But now naturopathic doctors have given the college through their college okayed the IV use for Lyme disease. So hopefully it'll go right across the country. I did lecture in Toronto.
Here in Ontario. In Ontario, our healthcare system is such that for an entire month I gave myself my own IV antibiotics in my living room every day.
My buddy's mom's been doing that for 6 weeks because she's got pneumonia. They wouldn't let her stay at the hospital. Well, They wanted her to stay at the hospital. She refused because she's just getting sicker at the hospital. So they sent her home with one of the bags and all that. And Tim's been there giving his mom helping because she's blind. So, yeah, a lot of people are doing that.
You can get IVs at home, and nurses will come out and give you lectures on how to do it.
Cool.
But right now,
I had to do my own because I use cannabis in my home and they wouldn't come in. Yeah.
Really?
I think cannabis? The visiting nurse wouldn't come in because of the cannabis. Well, it started out that we had a deal. She'd come an hour after I had my medicine so that the smell wasn't too bad. And then
the smell. It was about the smell.
And then she started being late. It was only the Scottish lady that would agree to come in the house at all. And then it was only an hour after I had my medication. And then it was, she was late, so she'd phone and tell me she was late, and I'd say, well, I have to medicate. Well, you're going to have to call me when you've medicated so I can wait an hour. And then, so I ended up doing it myself.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people can give it themselves, but it's a matter of getting it started.
Yeah. Well, they have these outpatient clinics where they can give you your little butterfly and you can So I think we have to. Marcel's got the link here for Armin Labs. I think we're going to share that.
Yep.
And then people can who have concerns can go talk to a naturopath or get their own test done or whatever they need to feel that they need to do, because I'm starting to think that this is a lot more widespread, even among people I know, than I ever could have imagined.
I'd like to give the doctor also a minute or two to tell people how they can get a hold of him, either your URL, where to look you up, that kind of thing.
Well, you could phone me at 604-869-9922 anytime.
Okay.
And leave a number, and I'll get back to you. Or my email is www.ernie-murakami@hotmail.com. That's easy to remember. Also, I'm on Facebook under Ernie Murakami, and I do a lot of education through the Facebook because it's got this 38 million people on the registered with them, and I can talk to people even though they write in Japanese or Chinese or German or Italian or Spanish. I got an app that does English translations by just flicking it. So I could talk to anybody with any language internationally now with my app.
Yeah, isn't that cool, eh?
You know, it's really neat. You know, it's all I have to do is say English translation, and I could translate what they say, and they could take my English and put down whatever translation they wanted.
Yep.
So it's an excellent app. It's got about 26 languages in the app.
Yeah,
so if you know of anybody out of country, that's fine. Just tell them to write in whatever language they like, and I could answer them back in English, and they could translate it back into their language.
Isn't that awesome?
It is. I'm quite impressed, and it's really been a real helpful for a lot of people, because it's not just in North America; it's all around the world.
Yeah.
Literally, it's a major epidemic around the world, and it's the #1 vector-borne disease now.
Wow.
But we're finding now, you've heard of Zika, and then there's Chagas, and there's about 4 or 5 new organisms that are invading North America because of the warming effect of the world. All those diseases from Africa, Western Nile virus, was never heard of in North America, but they're all coming to Canada because the world is too warm. It doesn't die off now. The mosquitoes used to die off, and they're no longer dying off.
Wow. Very enlightening conversation tonight, that's for sure. A little bit grossing me out here, but, you know, there's the reality going on here that, you know, we've been hearing about.
Well, I'm not trying to spread panic. I'm
of course.
trying to spread awareness, and I'm hoping that the medical world will not just sit down and just ignore us, who are Lyme literate, and get the word out. But even my studies on cannabidiol is still causing a lot of frown, even amongst the Lyme literate doctors. But once I get the University of New Haven to publish what we've been sponsoring and funding, I think they'll change their mind, because I was quite impressed when I found that the cannabidiol at 10 millimoles per cc definitely killed the Lyme in equivalent to the doxycycline, which is the standard anti-Lyme medication.
Wow.
I think that comes out. And then the biofilms were also completely destroyed at the 10 millimoles per cc. And that, if the millimoles of 10 milligrams per 10 millimoles per cc kills the spirochete and the biofilm, that is a tremendous asset. And if it kills the eggs, even more of an asset. But as I say, I'm getting people who are trying the cannabidiol after failure on all the common antibiotics and anti-inflammatories and analgesics. They're getting success with it. So I'm very happy that this would support the antibiotic effect that is being proven at the New Haven University by Dr. Eva Sappi.
And the spirochetes don't develop the resistance to cannabidiol like they do to the antibiotics.
No, that it could be possible that they can develop resistance to it as well. We don't know that. It's so new. I've only found out about this antibiotic effect a year ago, and the anti-biofilm effect only about 6 months ago, and we're finding that it is showing signs of killing the eggs, but this is all recent. But how long is it going to last? Is it going to all of a sudden get an immunity problem and find that it becomes resistant? We don't know. It's also new.
Wow.
So that's why we're doing a longer study on the eggs, because the eggs are the ones that perpetuate the disease right now. If you get bitten by a tick, you're getting infected not only by the spirochete, you're getting the eggs as well. Therefore, if a doctor says, oh yeah, all you need is two capsules of doxycycline, which lasts for a couple of days, it might kill the spirochetes, but it won't kill the eggs, because the eggs require a different set of antibiotics, and that's metronidazole, tinidazole, secnidazole, and plaquenil, and all of those have serious side effects. And so therefore, I'm hoping that the answer is the cannabidiol for the Lyme treatment, because basically the cannabidiol has no side effects of serious nature. And as I say, 5,000 years, it's been used in China. So what harm is there taking a product that is not showing any sign of a serious side effect, like most of the antibiotics and all these anti-cystic medications have serious side effects. All the antibiotics have serious side effects, allergies, hypersensitivities, resistance. Some of the these things like the metronidazole family is felt to cause cancer of the pancreas. But cannabidiol has not been known to do that. So it's a wonderful drug, and it may be the answer to chronic and acute Lyme disease. I'm hoping it is, and I hope our research will continue to prove it up, and eventually Dr. Eva Sappi will be writing a paper, hopefully within the next few months or so.
Well, I hope when you find out the findings, you'll come back and have a chat with us again.
Yeah, and I'll put it on Facebook and on my website. And my website is murakamicenterforlyme.org. If somebody wants to look in there, and I got lots of articles right on that article.
Awesome.
On that site. Lots of articles on the Facebook site as well.
Yeah, you've got. I watched one of your YouTube videos where you were speaking this afternoon, just to get a little bit of an idea who you were and what you do. Oh,
that was at the Richmond Neurovascular Clinic.
Okay.
That was a video, and it's actually I got the part of the effect of cannabidiol on spirochetes in there. There are some charts I put on there, and also the chart showing the biofilm effect as well. It's not that clear, but it's there.
Okay.
And hopefully we'll have a full medical article in the medical journals about the effect on spirochetes, biofilm, and eggs soon.
I hope so too. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Murakami.
You're welcome, and it's been a pleasure, and I hope you'll continue your education of, I don't know how many people listen to your program, but I'm sure you have a following. And,
we try.
You're welcome to repeat the lecture anytime you like, and let people know that it's there, and I'm always available to answer questions for anyone literally around the world, and they could write in their own language.
Yep. In about 5 minutes after we're done here and we wrap up, the podcast becomes available, and it just kind of goes plakow everywhere, and we share it on our social network and stuff. And I'll make sure that I send you a link as well for that. Okay, you give me a link on that. Awesome. Did you guys, any of you other voices, have anything you wanted to add or anything like that before we wrap up?
I'm getting tested, that's for sure.
Me too. I was just going to say that.
But, you can't always rely on the Canadian testing. Sometimes you're lucky you'll get a positive test, but the frequency is very low compared to other labs. So what do you suggest that we other than sending it to Germany, precautionary, what can we do, precautionary ways, we need to figure things like that out. Well, I have used Igenex probably as my number one, And there's also the other ones around too, like MDL and LabCorp and Fry Lab, and most universities have a lab doing the step 1 ELISA and step 2 Western blot.
Okay.
So you might have to rely on other labs other than those in Canada, because the results are very low in Canada. And then, as you've seen on the charts that I've presented, the contrast is almost a ratio of 70 to 1 for Canada across the Canadian border.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely going to. Hopefully, I'm hoping that something can be done, because quite frankly, this has scared the shit out of me. It sounds like something that a whole lot of people are going to have to be aware of.
If the doctors can't sit down and talk to each other, then it's got to be a political thing. Like in the States, right. Over half the American states now have laws protecting the doctors who are treating Lyme disease. And you can't take their charts, you can't cross-examine them, and you can't take their license now in 25 American states. And it's spreading right across because the doctors are told by the lawyers, sit down and discuss it. And if you don't discuss it by a certain date, then we'll make laws or statutes that prevent you from touching a doctor who is treating Lyme disease. And maybe that's what will have to happen in Canada, because the doctors are still saying we don't have Lyme, we don't know what you're talking about, you only need 30 days of treatment. 30 days is inadequate to kill the cystic survival form. It might kill the spirochete, but not the survival form.
This is definitely something that we have to keep.
And the politicians may have to become involved and tell the doctors it's got to be something between the family doctor and the patient.
Well, we're going to talk about it again. We're going to have you on again to talk about it, because I mean we could be going on and on here. As more happens, more information will be available. It is a new thing, just like cannabis, although it's not a new thing. You know what I mean? It's a new thing, but it's not a new thing.
Yeah, a similar thing. Like millions or thousands of years, but it's a new thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is new as far as the effectiveness for diseases.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Doctor. I'm looking forward to you coming back with some news about the next round of tests.
Okay. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us. This is the 420 Radio Show. We're going to sign off with some Killing Time Band. I thought It Doesn't Make Sense was a good song to play us out. We'll be back next week right here on LifestyleRadio.net. Thank you again, Doctor. We will be in touch.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night, guys.
Night, Al.
Good night.
Good night.
Profit organizations dedicated to influencing government policy with factual evidence. Our mission is to ensure that a constitutional medical program is developed that will address the concerns of all Canadians that require therapeutic cannabis. The task force is looking for dedicated people who are willing to contribute to our cause. We have formed this task force to foster a unified approach and focus on lobbying the federal government and Health Canada. We represent the combined expertise of thousands of patients with more than a decade of experience. As a task force participant, you, your business, or your group will have an opportunity to show that you care and offer your unique skills to promote the cause. If you would like to get involved, go to medcanataskforce.org. That's medcanataskforce.org and use the Contact Us link to get started. Help us help you.
I think it's time for a change. Gotta rip it on down and start again. You know it doesn't make sense. You know it doesn't make sense. You know I blame it on industry. I blame it on my own hypocrisy. Miseducation and politicians. No one's willing to step up and speak. I see my friends every day, trying to live their lives their own way. While you worry about the rent, while they're living in pain, but you won't grant them the right to take it away. You know it doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't make sense. You like music, you like weed, well, we gonna be good friends indeed. This is how much I like more than smoking trees. They'll make you dance the do-si-do and teach you how the chiba grows. Smoke a bowl on the 420 radio show.